All right.
We'll just have to speed talk.
All right. Let's get started. So, and I am recording this time. So tonight we got chapters 9, 10, and 11. 11 is a little bit of a longer one, but they're not that bad. So let's see who joins us. So chapter 9, persistence, the sustained effort necessary to induce faith, the 8th step towards riches. All right. I think this was kind of self-explanatory. Willpower and desire, when properly combined, makes an irresistible pair. Willpower, which they mix with persistence. I wrote persistence as, I might have even looked this up because I wrote it in the margin, of not giving up despite all opposition.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was kind of interesting. On page 226, he uses a quote, and I wrote, what do you think of this? It says, unless you are one of the 2 out of every 100 people who have already have a definite goal which you are aiming and a definite plan for its attainment, you may read the instructions and then pass on with your daily routine and never comply with those instructions. So I thought that was pretty interesting. That was 2 out of every 100 people that had a goal. You're saying don't have to do this, but right? Is that that's?
Yeah, just that it's second nature at that point.
Yeah.
They just do it.
But 2 out of every 100? That is crazy.
Are you one of those 2?
I doubt it.
Well, there you go.
Is anyone one of those 2 on this call? If you are, write in the comments below.
Well, I'm going to say this. I was one of those 2 when I got my veterinary hospital going because I knew what I wanted. I knew how to go after it. You know, like it says, reading this book makes me think of the path I took when I developed Meadowbrook Animal Hospital.
Yeah.
And I had no idea what I was doing. None.
Yeah.
So, but it was, you know, in reading this, it really go, wow, you did do this. And like it says, the persistence, it was just a matter of saying, okay, here's another obstacle. Now, how do I get around that? You know? So it was, I really understood the persistence part. This was a good chapter for me. Yeah. I really did. Mm-hmm.
I think when you're working your passion, like when you have your vision, you know what it is, you know where you're running to get, it's a whole different thing. And he's definitely talking about that. So I think like when you were opening up your practice, you knew what you wanted. It's just like with NLBP, I have the vision.
Right.
There are certainly some days where I'm like, and all entrepreneurs like this, we've talked about it, you're just like, oh my God, am I doing enough? Am I on the right path? Like you have those tough days as entrepreneurs, but yeah. Some of this is the same, but I like that it's, which also ties in with his other chapters, which he does all throughout the book, when it says, despite all opposition, because he's talked about in the other chapters and last week about, having friends and family and people that aren't really supportive or understand your vision, and they don't always say the nicest things, and they kind of give that negative influence. But I think persistence is, following that passion and that desire, uses desire, despite everything else.
I like the quote too. It just came to me in 227 where it says, if you find you are weak in persistence, center your attention upon the instructions contained in the chapter on power. Surround yourself with a mastermind group, and through the cooperative efforts of the members of this group, you can develop persistence. And I thought that was a good quote. A good
out of that, I did underline surround yourself with a mastermind group. I feel like we do that here. Where we might be each other's, because we're like-minded, like our support system a little bit, where others, friends and family, might not kind of see our piece.
The word resilience comes to mind.
Yeah.
Just keep going no matter what happens. Just get back up and keep going, right? So there's the focus, there's the desire, there's the power, right? All this just kind of comes together.
Yeah. And he writes, weak desire brings weak results. A small amount of fire makes a small amount of heat. I love that. Let's see. I underline this. Let's see. Poverty consciousness will voluntarily seize the mind, which is not occupied with the money consciousness. I believe on that.
Yeah.
You know, people live in that poverty state, or that what do we call it? Scarcity. Scarcity place. Yeah, they're afraid of everything. Yeah, the poverty consciousness develops without conscious application of habit favorable to it.
So the thing that always kept popping up in my mind, and the thing that I kind of have difficulty in sometimes is, you know, the same thing when the acres of diamonds, right? It's when do you give up an idea and say, okay, that's enough, it's not working, versus pushing through to keep going because you might be almost there, right? Like offering a product that you think is going to be great and it's just not working. Well, do you just keep going at it and be persistent, or do you just go, well, let me not put all the effort here and try something else?
So do you think when he's talking persistence, he means a product line or the
Well, I'm just using that as an example. I think overall he's, you know, talking more big picture.
Yeah.
Right. That's definitely the case. But I'm saying when I break it down, I'm thinking, okay, is persistence, try this product, didn't work. Okay, let me try something else. Let me be persistent till I'm successful with that, with whatever that is, with my business. Or, you know, so like kind of at what level, right? Strategic is up here and operational is down here. Right?
Well, when he talks like about Edison, he talks about, I don't know what chapter it is, but he talks about like all those failures that he had till he hit it. You know, and so that's persistence, him knowing that something's there and you keep going. Like, I think if you're creating programs, each time you fail, you learned what you failed and you create something better the next time, right? If it's a product line or if it's a service, or you get better and better and better at it, right? Even the first time you did a talk that might have been okay, if you give that same talk again, the second time you're better, and the third time you're better, and you let some stuff out, you got stuff in, you know how to close people better. You know, you used to close 10% of a room, now you can close 50% of a room. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think that's what persistence is. But if you're not doing well, to tweak it. Wasn't that in one of the chapters too?
Yeah, that he was talking about that. Yeah, about changing. You know, was it hold on to something and change it slowly? Wasn't it something about that in one of the chapters that he talked about? If you're working on something, don't be ready to change it real quick.
Yeah.
You know, is that what you're talking about, Paul? And to me that's persistence too. Is like, okay, go for it, but if you have to change it, you know, watch what you're doing before you totally just cut it out.
Yeah.
Well, he also said, you know, make decisions quickly and change slowly, as opposed
that's
to
what I'm talking about. Yeah.
drag out a decision, because by the time you make that decision, everything could be changed.
Right.
And what I'm talking about is
how I look at it is like pretty much what you guys are saying is that, you know, tweak it. But if you have to keep tweaking it and tweaking and tweaking to get it to work, then I think it's time to rethink it. You know, like push it aside. Where you talk about Ford, he's talking about a huge major production, bringing cars into the world. So that's, you know, that's a different kind of thing where we're talking about offering a variety of services,
right,
a little bit more on a smaller scale, like what you said, Paul, a bit more on a smaller scale. But I think if I was tweaking something and tweaking it, you know, maybe a couple times a year, trying to get it to pick it up, trying to get it to work, but it was not going anywhere, I think I would put my attention someplace else then.
So I'm not sure, actually I don't know the history and why, but Camille, you were in real estate and you got out of it.
Yeah.
Why? Can I ask?
I owned an investment firm, so I was the broker and I could broker everything, but at the turn of the market, I sold off my entire portfolio and went into cash and did other things.
Okay.
So it was just a good move at that time. And the whole market fell after that. So I just moved on. I had a success, but we've mentioned this before. Like I sell off businesses just because I like to.
Mm-hmm.
Like I like creating them. So that's but you know that I was in real estate for 10 or 12 years, you know, and just kind of moved my way up to owning my own company and becoming my own broker. You know, that was persistence. That's the way I wanted to do, because I don't like working for people. My father always taught me, don't never work for anybody. So, you know, that's just persistence. But I think in here, he says, like, with persistence will come success. It's like not having that defeating mindset in yourself, whatever it is. But I guess it could just be like owning your own company or doing something on your own, right? Persistence. I always feel that, well, I shouldn't even say it's me because I've read it, that most entrepreneurs leave right before they make it, right? Because there's that final leap, and a lot of them's like, I can't take it, or there's that dip. That's the way I think it is. I think it's persistence of constantly knowing you're going to get there. But I think it's getting through those failures. It's getting through those programs that you thought were going to sell, but it didn't sell. And that knowing of, you know, do I keep going in this direction? Do I go in the different direction? But you're still in the same business line. That's the way I'm taking it.
Okay.
One of the things I underline just says, if one does not possess persistence, one does not achieve noteworthy success in any calling. He talks about being on Broadway, which I thought was kind of interesting. That was like the place to be. So on 233, it says, persistence is a state of mind, therefore it can be cultivated. A state of mind determines success. It's a belief system. I believe belief systems are the most important. How long does this go? I won't read all of it, but it's a definite of purpose, desire. This is all stuff he talks about throughout the book, really. Self-reliance, right? The belief in one's own ability, even when someone else doesn't believe in you. Definite of plans, so organized plans, how we saw that. Accurate knowledge, and he does talk about, if you don't have the knowledge, to have people around you that have the knowledge. Cooperation, so that's the cooperation of others that are like-minded and believe in your spirit. Willpower, and the habit of persistence. So it's all stuff that he's talked about in the last few chapters. And to see how many of the 8 factors of persistence you lack. I think how he always talks about lack, he did it in the last chapter as well. Yeah, on organized plans, like what failure brings. That the symptoms of lack of persistence. I'm just looking at it. I don't have to read them all. But procrastination, didn't that come up in another, wasn't that in last chapter too?
Yeah, that was last week we talked about that. Yeah.
Procrastination. Procrastination being an emotion. Wasn't that last week? That was a great one. The weakness of desire, the lack of organized plans, so everything he's talked about. Wishing instead of willing, fear of criticism. So I thought it was really interesting in 236 that he says the mistakes in marriage are the lack of a really good partner and someone that believes in you. I thought, now this is 1936 when you talk about having a great woman by your side. But it says countless numbers of men and women, both young and old, permit relatives to wreak havoc in their lives. To wreck their lives in the name of duty because they fear criticism. We see that all, friends and family that say, don't aim so high. People will think you're crazy. Oh, and I love this. I even wrote this down because people used to tell me this all the time. Because if it was a good idea, someone else would have done it. And it says, why hasn't other person done this before? Oh my God, I hear that all the time. I don't know if you guys do, but it drives me insane. I'm like, yeah, that's what's called, that's called filling the gap. That's what you're supposed to do. And then it goes,
and there's also the statement that she could say, well, that's because I'm supposed to do it.
Yeah, my purpose. That's
There's
right.
the confidence, yeah.
All right. And he just talks about killing ambition before it gains control. All right, let me see what else. How to develop persistence, a definite purpose backed by burning desire for its fulfillment, which he talks through all throughout this book. A definite plan, which he went through in the organized planning chapter. A mind closed tightly against all negative and discouraging influences, including friends, family, relatives, acquaintances, and negative suggestions. And I would say that your own negativity as well. Right? Your own self-doubt is I think, really, really important. And a friendly alliance with one or more persons who will encourage one to follow through with both plan and purpose. And I think this is really important when there's an accountability partner or someone checks on you. And I think you have that at every single level. I have people that check up on me to make sure I'm hitting my numbers and doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And it's nice, I think, when we have that for each other. Does anyone have anything else on persistence? I kind of feel like the whole chapter is just talking over and over again about the definite of purpose and the trait of persistence. So I think we can wrap up that chapter if you guys are good with that. Good?
I found that whole little last part about Muhammad a little bit interesting.
Yeah, I actually did too. That he was a prophet, but he never performed a miracle.
But he led millions, got millions.
Sure did. I think that talks a lot about leadership. Yeah. All right, let's get to chapter 10, the power of the mastermind, which I love. The driving force, the 9th step towards riches. Power may be defined as organized and intelligently directed knowledge. Power, as the term is here used, referred to organized effort sufficient to enable an individual to transmute desire into its monetary equivalent. Organized effort is produced through the coordination of effort of 2 or more people who work towards a definite end in a spirit of harmony. I love that. Power is required for the accumulation of money. Power is necessary for the retention of money after it has been accumulated. Organized knowledge. So on the bottom of the page, when it talks about infinite intelligence, I love that infinite intelligence is even in a book from 1937. And we always go back to just saying, wow, this is so forward thinking in 1937, unless something more powerful and spiritual was happening back then. And then we took that all away out of society and now it's just coming back. I don't really know, like, if there's been a shift, but they talk about that third mind, like when you put 2 minds together and it creates this third and more power. You think outside the box when you're with each other.
I just think it's always been there. It's just been, presented in different ways. And it's really interesting to see how even way back then, they really believed in God, and in the forces of the universe, and everything that was happening around it. We've come up with different terms now, but, it's always been there. That's what I think is so cool.
Yeah. And they talk a lot about creative imagination beyond the plan. And I kind of found that all through the entrepreneurship and everything that he talks about, that it's that genius, that infinite intelligence, that's all creative imagination. So I love that when we all come together, we talk about co-creating. bring our minds together. It's co-creating. It's that imaginary piece. It's that beyond what we can do alone. Accumulated experience, experiment and research. Then he goes on to talk about the gaining of power through the mastermind, the coordination of knowledge and effort in a spirit of harmony. I love that. Between two or more people for the attainment of a definite purpose. I'm just kind of reading through to see. I underlined like half the books. The two characteristics of the mastermind principle, one of which is economic in nature and the other psychic. The economic feature is obvious. The economic advantages of creating, but the psychic phase of the mastermind principle is much more abstract, much more difficult to comprehend because it has a reference to the spiritual forces with which the human race as a whole is not well acquainted. I love
Still.
book. Still, I know. It's like crazy. It's like, hey, you knew back then. You may catch a significant suggestion from this statement. No two minds ever come together without thereby creating a third invisible and tangible force which may be likened to a third mind. Oh, I love that. And it's so true, right? It's co-creating. And then I wrote down here, I also wrote NLBP right next to it in the margin. I wrote the human mind, the human mind is a form of energy, a part of it being spiritual in nature. When the mind of two people are coordinated in a spirit of harmony, the spiritual units of energy of each mind form an affinity, which constitutes the psychic phase of the mastermind. Love that. So it's really just creating that third mind. It says great power can be accumulated through no other principle. And I wrote, it's a movement.
Well, what comes to mind for me right now is that statement, and I'm not going to quote it right, you know, in the Bible when Jesus is talking where two or more are gathered, there too am I. You know, in other words, you know, what he's talking about here when two people's mind come together, there's that infinite intelligence that's present, you know, is the spirit is just there. Yeah. That third mind.
Yeah. I've always been one, no matter when I had large staffs, any staff, it didn't really matter, but especially with large staffs, I loved bringing my problems to like the staff, be like, okay, I got a problem, everyone sit down. It would always just like, I never had to take it on myself as the leader because I knew together we would always figure it out. Like, I got this. Like, how do we solve it? Like, what do we do? Or this is what I'm thinking. Who knows how to get us there? Because I always thought as a group, we would figure it out. Like, it's so much better. There's so much more there when you do everything as a group.
That's cooperation. That's just a better part of leadership, is just bringing your issues, you know, how can we handle this? And then empowering your staff to help you.
Yeah.
Because that's what they're there for. Yep. That's beautiful. Yeah.
All right. A group of brains coordinated or connected in a spirit of harmony will provide more thought energy than a single brain, which is what we're talking about. When a group of individual brains are coordinated and functioned in harmony, the increased energy created through that alliance becomes available for every individual brain in the group. I'm reading this thing about Mr. Ford.
Yeah, that's yeah.
Oh, yeah. they said, because they always talk about Ford not being the brightest man in the room, but he always surrounded himself by really bright people. And they said that he made his biggest leap when he became personal friends with Thomas Edison.
Mm-hmm.
And you start to understand the influence of the one mind upon others that can accomplish. They always say, I don't know if it's in this book, but they always say like the people that you are associated with, and you're 5, right? You're 5,
Mm-hmm.
business 5 or friend 5, or you have 5s in different categories of your life. But those are the people that, what do they say, Paul?
Influence, you're the average of the 5 people that you hang around with.
Yeah. Yeah, you're the average of the 5 people that you hang around with. So always look who you're hanging around with to see how great you are. Like,
or not.
when I look, like even with this company, one of the things I started to seek out a couple months ago, actually, to grow, were people that owned much, much bigger companies than I did, to see how do you grow to this level? Because I can't ask people at this level, right? I have to ask people.
The experience.
Yeah, I have to ask people so above me that they're like, yeah, I got that. Like, you know, to start being in those crowds, that people, you know, that have 7,000 members or 10,000 members, and say, like, when you were little like me, what'd you do? And to constantly look, no matter whatever it is that you're into, to find people that are bigger. But even if you're, this is in our chiropractors group, we actually talk about this a lot. We talked about putting together a mastermind for our chiropractors, because I have a lot of young chiropractors that come to me that are single practitioners, and all of a sudden they have more patients. I guess this could be for any healer or patients, but if you have clients, and soon they grow out of, there's not enough hours in the day to help you're one person. You only have so many hours. And then when you max out, what's that next step? How do you grow? How do you bring in associates? How do you do other things in a business? In there, it was a practices through chiropractors talking about it. So what we did is we started matching them with like almost like mentor chiropractors that had bigger offices that brought in associates, because I didn't have the answers, but I knew some people did, you know, to mentor them into big ones. And I think that's where mentoring comes in. Which, I mean, in one of our calls, we kind of help people. Because everyone's at a different stage of their business. But even in your own business, you can find people that have brought it to that next level. And those are the people you're supposed to be talking to to get to that bigger side. Yeah, here he talks about Gandhi. Vibrations of thought he absorbed into his own mind. He came by power through inducing over 200 million people to coordinate with mind and body in a spirit of harmony for a definite purpose. He did not force. He talked about, well, wait, did I just lose my page?
255, 256.
It just keeps saying the same thing, that's all. I'm like, didn't I just read this? So I feel like he talks about this over and over and over again about infinite intelligence does not err.
Yeah, that was great.
I love that. So here, when 2 or more people coordinate in a spirit of harmony and work towards a definite objective, they place themselves in position through that alliance to absorb power directly from the great universal storehouse of infinite intelligence.
That's a way of saying what I said in terms of this world. I don't know how else to say it. You know what I mean?
I love that.
That's really cool. How it's a blending of, you know, the Bible and
yeah,
what Christ said. You know, wow.
Which is the greatest of all sources of power. It is the source to which the genius turns. It is the source to which every great leader turns, whether he may be conscious of the fact or not.
Wow.
That is pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So then he goes on, faith, desire, persistence, action. We're kind of getting the flow here. The positive emotions of thought form the side of the stream which carries one to fortune. And that pretty much wraps up that whole chapter. Look, we've gone through 2 chapters, only half an hour.
I just want to, on 256, I just thought it was kind of interesting how he says, this is not a course on religion. No fundamental principles described in this book should be interpreted as being intended to interfere either directly or indirectly with any man's religious habits.
That was so funny because that was like the 2 paragraphs above that where I said that's just what you said. That's like how Jesus.
Right, exactly.
And I was like, oh, I wonder if he was a religious man. And
yes, exactly.
Heard it. That's pretty interesting. Yeah, because actually in this whole book, I don't think he says the word God at all, does he?
Mm-mm.
No, not yet.
Like
Not yet, yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
He always talks about
Ether, internet.
ether,
Mm-hmm.
infinite intelligence.
Infinite intelligence, yeah.
I don't know if he talks about spirit, but yeah, awesome.
The mastermind.
Yeah. All right. So the biggest chapter of tonight, and I thought this was so interesting, the mystery of sex transmutation, the 10th step towards riches. And transmutation, I looked up in the dictionary, it says the action of change into another form. In case anyone was wondering out there. Actually, it says it's under here.
It says it right there.
Or transferring of one element or form of energy into the other.
Mm-hmm.
Because the ignorance on the subject, this state of mind is generally associated with the physical. And because of its improper influences to which most people have been subjected in acquiring knowledge of sex, things essentially physical have highly biased the mind. Constructive potentialities. The perpetuation of, this is just about sex, the maintenance of health, the transformation of mediocrity into genius through transmutation. Love that. So basically the whole chapter, he sums it up on the first page. It means the switching of the mind from thoughts of physical expression to thoughts of some other nature.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of taking all of your desire and everything you're thinking and just put it into what you're working on.
Mm-hmm.
Which I thought was kind of interesting.
Kind of reminded me a lot of, and I don't know the chakras that well, but with the chakras, our sexual chakra is very close to the creative chakra, which is basically what I got out of this is like take those sexual urges, the physical part of sex, and use them to create, put that energy into your creative center, which is the center right above. And I thought that was just amazing, that how they knew that back then, how you're saying that,
Wow. See, I don't really know a lot about this.
Yeah, I don't know the names of the chakras, but I know one of the things that Lynn has taught me a lot through, learning the chakras is exactly that the sexual chakra is right up, below your creative center.
Wow.
So if you take that physicalness, that sex brings to you. Yep. And that's what he mentioned throughout this whole chapter was exactly that. When men got their urge off of the physicalness of sex and focused it into their creative center, they became very, very powerful. Very, very powerful. It's kind of the saying that, men's minds is in their testicles, it's like, sorry, Paul. But it's just, that's, kind of a funny saying. It's getting hot, huh, Paul?
It says, if it is not transmuted into some creative effort, it will find a less worthy outlet. Fortunate indeed is the person who has discovered how to give sex emotion an outlet through some form of creative effort, for he has, by that discovery, lifted himself into the status of a genius. I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I actually wrote just myself. There's other outlet, unless you said it and I just wrote it. but I wrote in the margins, there's other outlets too that people go, if you talk about like alcohol, drugs, sex,
Yeah, that was in here.
on a spouse, like there's all sorts of other ways that people do things instead of taking that creative energy and working.
Mm-hmm.
All the things to do to avoid doing something.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Escapism almost.
Escapism, exactly, or deadening the senses. Yep. I think you can see that all throughout.
263.
Oh, is that the 10 minds?
10 mind stimuli.
Okay.
But he's referring them here as what really stimulates creativity. Isn't that what he's
That's
saying?
right. Yeah, because he did talk about some of the great works were written while they were all drunk.
Right, exactly.
Right? Under the influence of alcohol.
Right.
Edgar Allan Poe, his writing. And
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So these 10 are the things that really push us into, even fear, like it says, even fear as we think about that. But sometimes that's the only thing that gets somebody to do something.
See, so I was kind of confused with this because, as you just said, if you switch the sex into something more productive and more creative, that's good. But then here he says the first one is the desire for sex expression.
Mm-hmm.
So isn't that saying just the opposite?
Freely, or desire for. The human mind responds to stimuli through which it may be keyed up to high rates of vibration known as enthusiasm, creative imagination, intense desire, etc. The stimuli to which the mind responds most freely are the desire for sex expression. But maybe he's saying
Just having the desire, not
of like taking that desire and then just kind of redirecting.
Get the desire, vibrate at a higher level, and then go do something else with it.
Go do something else. Yeah.
But I think this desire for sexual expression is so innate. Procreation. If you look at animals' real desire for sex is just to procreate.
Yeah.
Okay. Now we as humans, take it further, and I think that's what he's saying is take that desire for the sex expression and use it, for creativity.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I got out of it.
Yes, that's what I'm getting out of it too. Of course, then he says love too. So what the emotion of love?
Yeah, we talked about that before. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Burning desire for fame, power, financial gain, or money. Music can be meditative though.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess if it brings you to a higher place, friendship between either those of the same sex or those of the opposite sex, so all friends. A mastermind alliance based upon the harmony of two or more people who ally themselves for spiritual or temporal advancement. Mutual suffering, such as that experienced by people who are persecuted. Autosuggestion, fear, narcotics, and alcohol. But the bottom ones are destructive.
But they also lead people to go into creativity. In other words, some of our worst nightmares cause us to really reach to a higher place, if you think about it. I think of like the mutual suffering. That made me think of the Jews.
Yeah, exactly what I thought of as well.
Okay.
And together.
Right. Yeah. Although these are on the bottom of the list, exactly what you're saying, the ones up higher, we would think as a more positive expression, and there's just a duality here. But I, like Paul said, narcotics and alcohol, it changes the brain, it changes the mind, but some of the greatest things have come as a result of that. Yeah. Yeah.
I guess he's saying all of these things create higher vibrations in us.
Music. Right. Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So fear I thought was interesting. Yeah, because it says 8 of these stimuli are naturally constructive, 2 are destructive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the list is used for comparison. So the use of the word genius, I think, is kind of interesting, because I'm not sure if he's using it as higher intelligence, or as higher intelligence is when the two minds come together, and genius is just like a single genius of one man. Genius is a man who wears long hair, eats food, lives alone, and serves as a target for the joke makers. A better definition of a genius is a man who has discovered how to increase the vibrations of thought to the point where he can freely communicate with sources of knowledge not available through the ordinary rate of vibration of thought. They actually talk about genius in another book called The Big Leap. I don't know if any of you have read it.
Mm-mm.
They talk about the that level of genius. They also talk about genius and power versus force. Of, you know, it's like your highest intelligence, your own personal highest intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so a genius is a person that can tap into that. That's interesting. Because we say that we do that a lot just through meditation, right? Or through intuition, listening to your own intuition. You know,
So the genius is
you have the answers and taking action on your knowing.
Yeah, that's where he goes next into when he's talking about the sixth sense and going with your
Right.
hunch.
Yeah, okay.
It's like you read this or something.
Yes. Uh-huh. I'm
All
just saying that.
Coming together.
Genius is developed through the sixth sense.
Okay.
Yep.
Expand to your genius.
Mm-hmm.
And expand to your genius. I think that's a word that actually comes, I wrote it in the margin, but so I always ask when I do work on myself or meditate or ask my own spirit, I always say, please allow me to expand to my genius. But I also got that word from The Big Leap, the book The Big Leap, expanding to your genius. So your creative imagination, the faculty of creative imagination, let me see. The faculty of creative imagination is the direct link between the finite mind of man and the infinite intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
Flash into one's mind, the allowing, the hunch. I love that, the flash into one's mind. When you quiet your mind, that flash is your intuition.
Mm-hmm.
That's your, what a lot of people call spirit or universe, your knowing, your allowing, your infinite intelligence, your higher self, God, angels, whatever people call it. If we would just listen. So I thought this was really interesting. When he starts to talk about what I call collective intelligence, I don't know what he called it here, but from the mind of some other person who has just released the thought or picture or idea or concept through conscious thought. So he was talking about you get the vibrations from someone else's thought, which I thought was amazing that he was even thinking on this level at all.
Right.
And because even now I read a lot about collective intelligence and what people think or don't think, or the vibrations of thought itself. But every time you think, the vibration of your thought has an influence on everyone around you.
Yeah, I call that the collective consciousness. You're reaching into you're reaching into that, and we're all, that's what intuition is just reaching into the collective consciousness, and that's
The answers.
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. I was wowed reading this, just going, oh my gosh, the whole idea of collective consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
Crazy that it was in here, far above the horizon of ordinary thought. And then I underlined this part and I wrote higher vibration by it. When lifted to this higher level of thought through any form of mind stimulation, an individual occupies relatively the same position as one who has ascended in an airplane to a height from which he may see over and beyond the horizon line, which limits his vision while on the ground. Moreover, while on this higher level of thought, the individual has not hampered or bound by any of the stimuli which circumscribed the limit his vision. And it goes on, but just talking about being at that higher level of thought, that higher vibration, that place of mystery. It'd be nice to just kind of float up there all the time.
Well, it's like you said, is in some of my spiritual studies would go to a higher altitude, perceive the situation from a much higher altitude, and it looks so different. You think you're in a crisis scenario, and when you raise yourself to higher vibration, you go, oh, it's not that bad. I can handle this. It's not easy when you're in it, but that's kind of what I got from this is like, okay, go higher, take yourself higher, and yeah, that's really cool.
The expression, look at the big picture.
Right.
Look at everything. It's like, oh.
This is nothing. Yeah.
Yeah, the sixth sense, the faculty which marks the difference between a genius and an ordinary individual. And I just wrote into the sides, tapping into your spirit, superconscious, universe, God, self, higher self. That sixth sense, love it. Tapping into your genius. It doesn't really tell you, well, I guess, I was just going to say, it doesn't really tell you how to do it other than like the mastermind and maybe I guess maybe the 10 stimuli, I guess. Creative imagination from within. All right, what else? With my eyes closed, I am able to draw upon a source of superior intelligence. That's quieting the mind, again. And for those who meditate.
Where you at? What page you at?
Very top at 268.
Oh, okay.
It says, with my eyes closed, I'm able to draw upon a source of superior intelligence. This was talking about Gates, right? Dr. What's his name? Oh, Elmer
R. Gates.
Yeah. Who he was paid to go into like his personal communication room and stay quiet and see how he could see things. Concentrate on the known and the unknown comes to you. It's wild. I think the problem today, and apparently back then, is we don't take the time to be quiet and listen. Like when a problem comes up, we kind of manifest more problems by like worrying about it instead of taking that step back and sitting on it and allowing the answers to come to us.
Yeah, we let our mind take over.
Yeah.
Instead of going into our heart and letting our emotions come forward is I think part of it. That's the battle between the heart and the mind. You know what I mean? Is exactly that. The mind comes in and just, they call that monkey mind, where you just can't quiet it. Whereas, like you said, when you go into meditation or just become quiet, you allow that listening to that spirit, the soul inside of you, that to come forward, and truly give you your answers,
What are the
that's what, I mean, like you said, back then, even then they're talking about it, and in their own way.
crazy.
We already talked about the creative imagination. That was someplace.
Well, yeah, I was just looking at that, the creative and synthetic imagination, but that was actually in our chapter last week.
Okay.
Where the creative imagination, creative was when you created it yourself, synthetic was when you copied an idea and made it
Right.
different, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Just imagine. So I'm wondering if back then, now I don't know a lot about 1937 or the life that he went through, if they did do meditation or they took quiet time each day, but I guess they didn't have all the noise we have today. Like as far as like the internet and the, 24-hour TV and, artificial lighting that changes our body rhythm. They had more time to be quiet, if that makes sense. So I don't know if they meditated. Like, I feel like now we need to take quiet time.
Well, from what I have studied, is that this goes way back. I'm gonna guess to say something like around the 1400s, 1600s, that they were very much into the universe, very much into the stars, and looking for guidance.
Okay.
So I think they were into that kind of mystical kind of things, as you, if you want to call it that, those kind of things as far as guidance. And it wasn't until I don't know when that it got to a point like how we are now, how in this day and age, how we have, do you go to church? Do you not go to church? What category are you in? So that, like anything else, it pulled away from that. But they were much into very, like I said, I'm going to use the word mystical. They're looking at the stars for advice and things like that. They were very much into. So it's not very, how can I say, they're not very, I'm not surprised that they're into this kind of stuff. I'm just surprised that he's actually writing it into a book, because I don't know if back in the 30s or the 40s and the 50s where they kind of lost that. I don't know if it went back into the 60s and the 70s where they started going into, the Woodstock, the drugs and all that kind of stuff. They kind of, that whole idea why we have to do drugs, that kind of thing. I don't know. That's where it kind of shifted.
Yeah.
But they did follow that. They were very, I don't know what comes to my mind is mystical, in looking for answers and things like that.
Okay. Way back. This was 1937 though. So a lot of
I know.
make it into the final edition, but I don't know what was cut.
And when was the final edition written? Because that might be where it split.
I don't know. I actually have it somewhere, but I don't know where it is.
Like, why would they decide to take the spiritual part out?
Well, what's left? Now that I know this book and I have pulled the whole thing apart, I'm like, what's left outside of I think the whole book's spiritual. So I don't know what is left. And that's why I would love to see like a mock-up of like what was crossed out, what made it. Because the one that actually went to publication is half the size of this, at least half the size of this. It's like 180 pages or something.
Really? Wow.
But I don't know what was taken out. So, and they clearly still got the secret out of it. So they had to keep some stuff in there. And that's why this unedited manuscript is so important now that it's public property. I should just Google it. I'm sure it's out there. So I thought it was interesting. It says, he stimulates, I'm on 270. He stimulates his mind so that it vibrates on a higher than average plane using one or more of the 10 mind stimulants or some other stimulant of his choice. Oh, this is when they were talking about grades. He concentrates upon the known factors of his invention and creates in his mind a perfect picture of the unknown factors, the unfinished part of this invention. Holds the picture into his mind until it's taken over by the subconscious mind, then relaxes by clearing his mind of all thought and waits for his answer to flash into his mind. That's meditation right there. Right?
Yeah, that's exactly, yeah.
Meditation right there.
Right, yeah. So you're clearing your, yep.
Yeah, if you had to say what meditation was, that's it right there. There's plenty of reliable evidence that the faculty of creative imagination exists. Leaders in their respective callings without having had extensive education. Lincoln was a notable example of this great leader, and they go talking about love next, and then how love, the emotion of love. What I got out of this is men are only brilliant because women are behind them. I don't know what you got out of it. We all interpret things differently.
Yeah, what I got out of it on a note is that every brilliant man does have a woman behind him, but that woman is also, he goes into it about sex, love, and family.
Yeah.
And how, I thought his explanation of masculine and feminine was beautiful. I really did, because and Paul helped me here because I don't have a man's perspective, you do, is that men really love to care for women. Men really, and And we as women really love to be cared by men, cared for by men. And in that relationship, that's the love part. And if a man knows he has a woman standing beside him and sharing with him, it really helps his creative capacity, abilities. I mean, I that's just beautiful.
I know Paul has to take this call, right, Paul?
Yeah, sorry. I'm going to kind of stick around anyway. Hold on.
No problem.
Keep going.
All right. So in that same way, but I think in this day and age, we can recognize that love is love. So I think it's just the power and emotion of having someone love you so thoroughly, or loving someone and maybe, not talking about it. That could happen too, because someone talked about I think it was more on the sex side, but kind of the energy that he got from his beautiful secretary.
Right.
So it could be whatever you're attracted to.
Right.
But it's the emotion of attraction and then emotion of love.
Uh-huh.
So I just thought that was really interesting. But
on page 274, I just thought it was interesting. The desire for sexual expression is by far the strongest and most impelling of all the human emotions. That's what he says as the first statement.
Right.
For this very reason, this desire, when harnessed and transmuted into action other than that of physical expression, may raise one to the status of a genius. I just think that that's the epitome of a woman being with a man in relationship, in sexual relationship.
Uh-huh.
When that man is able to harness that energy that he feels, and take that, I just thought was beautiful. I really, but like you said, it's love. It's really, that's the expression of love, because it doesn't matter. In this day and age, even as women, is like, if you have a great man standing next to you, and go the same way. It really, really can support. Mm-hmm.
Whoever that partner is for you. It's just the majority of men never learn that the urge of sex has other possibilities, which far transcends in importance that of mere physical expression. The majority of those who make this discovery do so after having wasted so many years at a period when the sex energy is at its height prior to the age of 45 to 50. This usually is followed by a noteworthy achievement. And he goes on to say that that's why most men make great achievements later in life.
No, I thought how he had it broken down into the age, was kind of interesting too. And I thought, a lot of men lose it after 40.
Well, I was going to say that, yeah. Women kind of go through it. I think when you're young, probably both sexes.
Right, the physical expression.
Have like that the physical is much in a different place than it is as you get older and you mature out of it. And then love takes over.
Right,
it's not that same teenage kind of sex idea as it is when it's real love. Mm-hmm. It gives you that whole other dimension of what life could be. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a maturity thing on so many different levels, but that's also why people start their own businesses or start new heights. And we see it today, like people work for corporations and then they want that second piece of their life, that next step, that's something else. And we usually find, especially in this group, most people came out of a different life. It's one of our avatars. It's like who we are as a group. And they don't decide to be their authentic self, usually in their late 40s is when people start this group. That's where we're seeing, like obviously older too, but they've made a step in their life, like they've changed. But I think it's just a maturity thing, and being at a financial place where you're able to make a leap like that too. No satisfactory substitute for nature's stimulants has ever been found. And it goes on to say the most powerful of all human emotion is that of sex.
Where are you at?
276.
Okay.
We're just talking about mind stimulants. Highly sexed men are the most efficient salesmen. The explanation is that the factor of personality known as personal magnetism is nothing more nor less than sex energy. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Highly sexed people always have a plentiful supply of magnetism. I can say a lot about that. That's true.
Mm-hmm.
This energy may be communicated in other ways through the following media. The handshake. I thought that was kind of cool. The
Yeah.
tone of someone's voice. And we actually talked about this. I actually just did a podcast. It's not released yet. But it was, what was it called? Something about your voice and spirituality or your tones. But we talked a lot about sound and tones.
Mm-hmm.
And how different sounds, even the sounds of your voice, and how that affects others around you, if it's high, if it's low, what you considered sexy or, magnetizing to you, but someone else might be something very different. It's that tone, like, your mother's tone.
Mm-hmm.
People babies come out of the womb knowing their mother's voice or their father's voice if they spoke to them, and the voices around them. It's kind of really interesting. Posture and how you carry your body, the vibrations of thought, and body adornment, always to express sexual energy. I thought that was kind of cool. The first, it says, personal magnetism is the first requirement of any salesman. Love that. That's like when you see people selling pharmaceutical sales, all really good looking people.
Yes, isn't that the truth? You're right. You're right.
All right, I'm on 279. I kind of lightly underlined this, so I'm not sure why. It seemed quite significant to the author when he made the discovery that practically every great leader whom he had the privilege of analyzing was a man whose achievements were largely inspired by a woman. That's interesting. Inspiration has been traced to the other woman. He talks about I have intemperance in sexual habits is just as detrimental as intemperance in habits of drinking and eating. When they talked about that secretary or what it was. So the other woman. All right.
But in that same paragraph, I like how he says, in many instances, the woman in the case was a modest, self-denying wife of whom the public had heard but little or nothing. So there's, this woman who's, really the backbone of the man, but no one knows about her.
Yeah, I think we see that in a lot of instances, more than we realize. I'm just reading. Every other animal responds to the call of sex only in season. Man's inclination is to declare open season. The overindulgence in sex expression may become a habit as destructive and as detrimental to creative effort as narcotics or liquor. I totally believe that. Yep. The average man reaches the period of his greatest capacity to create between 40 and 60 years old. Years between 40 and 50 are, as a rule, the most fruitful. Now I'm on 282, and I have, when driven by his desire to please a woman, based upon the motive of sex alone, a man may steal, cheat, and even commit murder. But when the emotion of love is mixed with the emotion of sex, that same man will guide his actions with more sanity, balance, and reason. Criminologists have discovered that the most hardened criminals can be reformed through the influence of a woman's love. This is kind of what we were saying before. When people reach that, I think it's also emotional maturity. In their 40s to early 50s, which is exactly the same time that this is happening. All of a sudden, you don't need just the urge of sex as much as it's nice as if you also have the love that's combined.
Right. Yeah, that's,
And it
yeah.
kind of puts you in a much different place. And it's sanity, balance, and reason. I like that. Love, romance, and sex are all emotions capable of driving men to heights of super achievement. Yeah. It was, I don't know if I read it or if it was a documentary. I don't even know where the hell I saw it. But it said, men are natural hunters. They just are by instinct. And sex is like part of that natural hunt.
Oh, hunting for a woman.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
they're just natural hunters. And I was probably reading something about dating. I don't know where this is coming from, but I remember reading something that men are natural hunters. So if someone isn't pursuing you, like, it's not worth it for you to pursue them, because if they can't catch you, it's like, that's not a good thing.
Okay.
They naturally pursue what they want. They're hunters. They want to hunt.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think sex would be that same way, right? So now
so it's kind of like the old adage, like, don't give everything on the first date.
Yeah. Like, why buy the cow if you're getting the milk for free?
Right, exactly.
Let me see.
I have to say that I love you guys' conversation back and forth. I muted myself. I'm over here giggling,
Well, this part of the book. I mean, I really enjoyed this chapter. I really did.
I did too.
I just thought, how he presented these things were, again, it was from a man's mind. I have to look at it that way.
Right.
But yet at the same time, I thought he really hit it right on the head. You know what I mean? As far as how he said things.
Yeah. Basically, I outlined this piece because I think this sums up the entire chapter. It says, encourage the presence of the emotions as the dominating thoughts in one's mind, and discourage the presence of all of the destructive emotions. The mind is a creature of habit. It thrives upon the dominating thoughts fed it. Through the faculty of willpower, one may discourage the presence of any emotion and encourage the presence of any other. Control of the mind through the power of will is not difficult. Control comes from persistence and habit. The secret of control lies in understanding the process of transmutation. When any negative emotion presents itself in one's mind, it can be transmuted into a positive or constructive emotion by the simple procedure of changing one's thoughts. There is no other road to genius than through voluntary self-effort. I thought that was interesting.
It just makes me think of the book that I read about, You Can't Afford the Luxury of a Negative Thought. That whole statement that he just said there was exactly that, was like, don't allow negativity to become part of your, negative emotions, your thought pattern.
Yep. Okay,
because that's what you're inviting in. Whereas we do have kind of like the earlier on when he said, go to a higher perspective. What we talked about, go to a higher altitude. That's what that is for me, is just change. And we can, just as quickly as we come into that negative place, we can get ourselves out of it.
If we recognize it.
Right, exactly.
It's training is recognizing it, right?
Right, that's the truth.
Yeah. The emotion of love brings out and develops the artistic and the aesthetic nature of man. It leaves its impression upon one's very soul, even after the fire has been subdued by time and circumstance. It talks about being moved by genuine love, enduring traces upon the human heart. Love is spiritual in nature. I totally believe that.
Yeah.
I think love is a very spiritual emotion. It comes when it pleases and goes away without warning. I wrote that down because I thought that was an interesting thing to say. But spend no time worrying about its departure.
Mm-hmm.
Love is whimsical and temperamental. Its nature is empirical and transitory. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Just so beautiful the way they talk about the emotion of love.
And like the being present in the moment, accept and enjoy it while it remains, but spend no time worrying about its departure, because worry will never bring it back.
Yeah, so
Mm-hmm.
beautiful. And then and I outlined on 287, it says, love is spiritual, sex is biological.
Mm-hmm.
No experience which touches the human heart with a spiritual force can possibly be harmful, except through ignorance and jealousy.
Mm.
Love it. Love is, without question, life's greatest experience. It brings one in communication with infinite intelligence. I totally believe that.
Mm-hmm.
But mixed with the emotion of romance and sex, it may lead one far up the ladder of creative effort.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. I thought this was really interesting at the bottom. It talks about love and sex and marriage. Marriage not blessed with the eternal affinity of love, properly balanced and proportioned with sex, cannot be happy ones and seldom endure. Love alone will not bring happiness in marriage, nor will sex alone. When these two beautiful emotions are blended, marriage may bring about a state of mind closest to spiritual that one may ever know on this earthly plane. When the emotion of romance is added to those of sex and love, the obstructions between the finite mind of man and infinite intelligence are removed. Then a genius is born.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
I gotta get me some love.
Romance.
That's what I'm missing. All right. A man's greatest motivating force is his desire to please a woman. I actually believe that.
Mm-hmm.
That's that whole thing that I was saying before with it's natural for a man to pursue.
Right.
Right? When he wants something and he truly loves a woman,
Mm-hmm.
he never stops pursuing.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, this is where they talk about the hunter. Yep. Mm-hmm.
It is this inherent desire of a man to please a woman, which gives woman the power to make or break any man.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I wrote haha by this. Most men will not admit that they are easily influenced by the woman they prefer, because it is in the nature of a male to want to be recognized as the stronger of the species. Moreover, the intelligent woman recognizes this manly trait and very wisely makes no issue of it. I think that is so true.
Mm-hmm.
And they end the chapter by saying, no man is happy or complete without the modifying influence of the right woman. And I think basically what they're saying in this whole chapter is that combination of the higher spiritual side of love,
Mm-hmm.
and the right type of sex, and changing over that physical power into co-creation.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I think it's really co-creation with the one you love, because without that, you don't have what he's saying is, without that, you don't have the higher intelligence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is
I
one.
think also I think happen with the happiness too. You're in love, you have family, you have everything. You feel like you have it all. So you're in a happier space, creative kind of space. If you say, oh, I'm single, or I'm lonely, or I'm this, or I'm that, might be, you're not going to be as creative as somebody who is in a good, happy space. But I have also heard that, and I have seen this happen, that when work is going well, family stuff is a problem. And when family stuff is going well, work stuff can be, a problem. You ever see that kind of rocking back and forth kind of a thing? Sometimes I've seen it when things, when things do all work at the same time, but sometimes one is off. One is drawing your attention more than the other, in one direction or another. I don't know if you've ever seen that or not.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, I was just trying to think through as you were saying that, is if in certain circumstances I've also seen that when marriages aren't going well, one spouse overworks just to stay out of the home. It could go either
Yes.
way. Both men and women
Yes,
work.
that's true. Yeah.
Or they start to travel, where it could be a choice not to, to spend time out, which just further breaks apart the issue.
Yes.
So I'm just wondering if, one is kind of created out of the other.
I would think so.
Yeah. Because there's certainly people that are just happy in all aspects. Because I think that's more the wheel of life, is if you stay balanced.
Yeah, well, that's the key right there, the balancing of the duality. We can go to one extreme and the other extreme, but we really need to be right in the middle of those extremes. You know what I mean? That's where the balance is. Experiencing, if you say good or bad, whatever the two polarities are, is just staying. That to me is what enlightenment is. That to me is what, being in your spiritual self is just being in that balance of the world. Whatever's happening, you're not over on this side or on that side. You're right, but like you were saying, as we do become in balance, all of a sudden work just has priorities that we have to take care of. So home becomes unbalanced. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think that's not always a conscious choice, but
Right.
choice
Right.
that sometimes we make unconsciously, because all of a sudden we're like, well, I got to do this, I got to do this, I got to work, and then your family starts to, it could just be self too. It could just be, like I've seen people all the time like not work out, so they can work all the time, and I'm like, well, you'll never have your creative mind if you don't do anything for yourself. Like you lose your creativity.
And no fun time, no downtime.
If you don't have downtime, you can't, you're not going to grow higher because you're losing creativity.
Yeah.
So it's such an important piece. And that's same with family, like spending time with family. You need the mental downtime from your job to reach higher places. But I think that's the same of the love. It's the love of self. It's the love of family. It's the love of, like, you have to have that kind of balance. So I always say it's better to have like 60% in all areas of your life and have that kind of constantness in all areas than to have something that's like 90% and something that's like 10%. I feel really good about one thing and really crappy about the other thing, because that crappy piece will be the death of you, right? It'll just like sit on, I always want the monkey on your back.
Yeah.
Right?
It pulls you down, and then you're less creative.
Yeah. I think you need quiet time to be creative. In fact, the next book I'm going to read was saying that, what was the thing? Sometimes a lot of people, it was more about entrepreneurship and growing your own business, but you spend so much time working in it that you lose your creative vision. So you're not really growing it. You're just kind of sustaining where you are because you're working around the clock. That if you can get past that point, then that's where the creativity and the growth and everything happens. Like you need that time to think through all the possibilities and think through whatever you're doing, your revenue streams, your whatever they are for you. But
it's like pulling away and seeing the big picture.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Infinite intelligence that we were talking about earlier. It's that quiet time. It's that, that space for yourself. And they always say, find 20 minutes a day to meditate. And if you feel that you're too busy to find 20 minutes, double it.
Right.
Oh,
yeah.
Because you need the extra 20 minutes just to quiet the mind down.
Right.
Meditate twice. And they always say 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the evening, and take that quiet time just to reflect and create. Lovely.
Yeah.
All right. So that is wrapping up our 3 chapters for the evening. I really liked those chapters.
Yeah.
Our next 3 are actually 12, 13, 14. And they're actually very small chapters. So a lot of people that maybe weren't able to catch up should be able to catch up to us next week, because these chapters are really small.
Ooh, they are really short, yeah.
They're really short. And then what happened is we had 1 week after that, and the last one is like really, really long. So I just threw that into the last week, and then we can talk about the book as a whole.
Okay.
So we'll do that. So the next 3 chapters, 12, 13, 14, will be next Tuesday night. And then the last chapter. So we only have 2 more weeks left of our books discussion.
Yeah, the next 2 weeks for me, Camille, I'll be joining on phone.
Okay.
And I probably will be joining a little bit later than after 8. Okay, but I'll. So if I ding in after user started, that's why.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep. So hopefully, I know next week is like a holiday week. A lot of people take that week off, but hopefully we'll have some time. And
Oh, that's right. July, the 4th of July is coming up. Yep. Okay, cool.
be able to do that. Alrighty. I'm gonna